St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin, also known as the National Cathedral and Collegiate Church of St. Patrick, Dublin, or in the Irish language as Ard-Eaglais Naomh Pádraig, founded in 1191, is the largest church in Ireland and one of Dublin's two Church of Ireland cathedrals. It has a 43-metre spire. Christ Church, the other cathedral, is the diocesan cathedral of the Diocese of Dublin and Glendalough. Background: unusually, St. Patrick's is not the seat of a bishop, as the Archbishop of Dublin has his seat in Christ Church Cathedral. Since 1870, the Church has designated St. Patrick's as the national cathedral for the whole of Ireland, drawing chapter members from each of the 12 dioceses of the Church of Ireland. The Dean is the ordinary for the cathedral. This office has existed since 1219. The most famous office holder was Jonathan Swift. Status: there is almost no precedent for a two-cathedral city, and some believe it was intended that St. Patrick's, of secular cathedral, would replace Christ Church, a cathedral managed by an order. A confrontational situation persisted, with considerable tension over the decades after the establishment of St. Patrick's, and was eventually settled, more or less, by the signing of a six-point agreement of 1300, Paces Compositio. Still extant, and in force until 1870, it provided that the consecration and enthronement of the Archbishop of Dublin was to take place at Christ Church. Records show that this provision was not always followed, with many archbishops enthroned in both, and at least two in St. Patrick's only. Christ Church had formal precedence as the mother and senior cathedral of the diocese. Christ Church was to retain the cross, mitre and ring of each deceased Archbishop of Dublin. Deceased Archbishops of Dublin were to be buried alternately in each of the two cathedrals, unless they personally willed otherwise. The annual consecration of chrism oil for the diocese was to take place at Christ Church. The two cathedrals were to act as one, and shared equally in their freedoms. Over the following centuries, the two cathedrals functioned together in the diocese, until in the period of disestablishment of the Church of Ireland, the current designation of one as the Cathedral of Dublin and Glendalough, and one as the National Cathedral, was developed. History: pre-Reformation period. In 1192, John Cummin, first Anglo-Norman Archbishop of Dublin, elevated one of the four Dublin Celtic parish churches, the one dedicated to St. Patrick, beside a holy well of the same name and on an island between two branches of the River Poddle, to the status of a collegiate church, i.e. a church with a body of clergy devoted to both worship and learning. The new collegiate church fell outside the city boundaries, and this move created two new civic territories, one under the Archbishop's temporal jurisdiction. The church was dedicated to God, Our Blessed Lady Mary and St. Patrick, on the 17th of March 1191. Common's Charter of 1191 or 1192, which allowed for a chapter of 13 canons, of which 3 held special dignities, was confirmed by papal bull within a year. The 13 prebendaries attached to the church were provided with archiepiscopal lands. Over time, a whole complex of buildings arose in the vicinity of the cathedral, including the Palace of the Saint, Sepulchre, and legal jurisdiction was divided between a liberty controlled by the dean around the cathedral, and a larger one belonging to the archbishop adjacent. While it is not clear when precisely the church was further raised to the status of cathedral, a unique move in a city with an existing cathedral, it was probably after 1192, and Common's successor as Archbishop, Henry de Lowndes, was elected in 1212 by the chapters of both Christ Church and St. Patrick's, this election being recognized by Pope Innocent III. See below for more on the question of status. Henry granted a number of further charters to the cathedral and chapter between 1218 and 1220, and one of these in 1220 created the office of dean to head the cathedral, the right of election being allocated solely to the canons of the chapter. The basis of the present building, as noted, the largest church in Ireland, was built between 1191 and 1270. Though little now remains of the earliest work beyond the baptistry, much of the work was overseen by the previously mentioned Henry of London, a friend of the King of England and signatory of the Magna Carta, who was also involved in the construction of Dublin's city walls and Dublin Castle. An order from King Henry III in 1225 allowed the collection of donations from across the island for reconstruction for a period of 4 years, and the work, in the early English Gothic style, lasted at least until rededication in 1254. The Lady Chapel was added around 1270. In 1300, Archbishop Ferrings of Dublin arranged an agreement between the two cathedrals, the Pacis Compositio, which acknowledged both as cathedrals and made some provision to accommodate their shared status. For more, see status below. In 1311 the medieval University of Dublin was founded here with William de Rodyard, Dean of St. Patrick's, as its first Chancellor, and the canons as its members. It never flourished, and was suppressed at the Reformation. For the mid-14th century, and for over 500 years, the north transept of the building was used as the parish church of St. Nicholas without. The tower and west nave were rebuilt between 1362 and 1370, following a fire. The name commemorates Thomas Minot, Archbishop of Dublin 1363–75, who oversaw the rebuilding. For the very earliest years there were problems with seepage of water, with a number of floods, especially in the later years of the 18th century, caused by the surrounding branches of the River Poddle. Even in the 20th century, it is reported that the water table was within 2.3 meters of the floor. This situation ensured there would never be a crypt or basement area. Reformation period. After the English Reformation, St. Patrick's became an Anglican Church of Ireland cathedral, although most of the population of the surrounding Pale remained Roman Catholic. During the confiscation process, some images within the cathedral were defaced by soldiers under Thomas Cromwell, and neglect led to collapse of the nave in 1544. Under King Edward VI, St. Patrick's Cathedral was formally suppressed, and the building demoted back to the status of parish church. On 25 April 1547, a pension of 200 marks sterling was assigned to Sir Edward Basnet, the Dean, followed, some months later, by pensions of £60 each to Chancellor Alien and Precentor Humphrey, and £40 to Archdeacon Power. The silver, jewels, and ornaments were transferred to the Dean and Chapter of Christ Church. The King designated part of the building for use as a courthouse. The Cathedral Grammar School was established in the then Vicar's Hall and the deanery given to the Archbishop. Following the transfer of the Archbishop's Palace to the Lord Deputy of Ireland, in 1549, it was further ordered that the walls be repainted and inscribed with passages from the Scriptures. In 1555 a charter of the joint monarchs Philip and Mary restored the cathedral's privileges and initiated restoration, and a late document of Queen Mary's reign, a deed dated the 27th of April 1558, comprises a release a receipt by Thomas Levrius, the new dean, and a chapter of St. Patrick's, of the goods, chattels, musical instruments, etc., belonging to the cathedral and which had been in the possession of the Dean and Chapter of Christ Church. It was during this reign that the patronal festival of the Blessed Virgin Mary was last celebrated. Following the ejection of the Catholic Chapter of Canons in 1559, the Catholic Catholic community continued in the 1560s, 1570s at least to go on nominating canons and the principal dignitaries to St. Patrick's. In 1560, one of Dublin's first public clocks was erected in St. Patrick's steeple. 17th century. By the early 17th century, the Lady Chapel was said to have been in ruins, and the arch at the east end of the choir was closed off by a lath and plaster partition wall. There was also routine flooding, and a series of galleries was added to accommodate large congregations. In 1620, the English-born Judge Luke Gernon referred to the cathedral's poor state of repair during the stay of Oliver Cromwell in Dublin. During his conquest of Ireland, the Commonwealth's Lord Protector stabled his horses in the nave of the cathedral. This was intended to demonstrate Cromwell's disrespect for the Anglican religion, which he associated with Roman Catholicism and political royalism. After the restoration of the monarchy in 1660, repairs to the building were begun. In 1666, the cathedral chapter offered the Lady Chapel for the use of French-speaking Huguenots who had fled to Ireland, and after some repair and preparation works, it became known as l'Église Française de St. Patrick. A lease was signed on the 23rd of December 1665 and was renewed from time to time until the special services ceased in 1816, by which time the Huguenots had been fully assimilated into the city population. In 1668, the roof, in danger of collapsing, was taken down, a new roof being completed by 1671. Buttresses were erected and the west window was replaced with a perpendicular window. Then, in the 1680s, the choir was reformed. In 1688–90, during the Williamite War in Ireland, James II and his fellow Roman Catholics briefly repossessed St. Patrick's. James attended mass services there with his Jacobite supporters for a time. However, the victory of the Protestant Williamites in this war meant that the cathedral was restored to Anglican ownership in 1690 when James abandoned Dublin after his defeat at the Battle of the Boyne. 18th century. Throughout its long history, the cathedral has contributed much to Irish life, and one key aspect of this relates to the writer and satirist Jonathan Swift, author of Gulliver's Travels, who was dean of the cathedral from 1713 to 1745. Many of his famous sermons and Irish tracts were given during his stay as dean. His grave and epitaph can be seen in the cathedral, along with those of his friend Stella. Swift took a great interest in the building, its services and music, and in what would now be called social welfare, funding an almshouse for poor women and St. Patrick's Hospital. The choir school, which had been founded in 1432, supplied many of its members to take part in the very first performance of Handel's Messiah in 1742. In 1749, the cathedral spire was added by George Semple. It remains one of Dublin's landmarks. In 1792, divine service was temporarily suspended due to the poor condition of the south wall, then 60 centimeters out of perpendicular, and of parts of the roof. Chivalric chapels. Knights of St. Patrick. From 1783 until 1871, the cathedral served as the chapel of the most illustrious Order of St. Patrick, members of which were the Knights of St. Patrick. With the disestablishment of the Church of Ireland in 1871, the installation ceremony moved to St. Patrick's Hall, Dublin Castle. The heraldic banners of the knights at the time of the change still hang over the choir stalls to this day. Knights of St. Lazarus of Jerusalem. The cathedral contains the so-called Dunsany Chapel, which is the spiritual home of the military and hospitaller Order of St. Lazarus of Jerusalem. The decoration of the chapel was provided for by Randall Plunkett, 19th Lord Dunsany, who established the Knights of St. Lazarus in Ireland in 1962. The cathedral is used for investiture ceremonies, and the dean of the cathedral is an ecclesiastical commander of the order. 19th century. By 1805, the north transept was in ruins and the south transept was in a poor condition. Urgent work was carried out to the nave roof, held up by scaffolding. In 1846, the post of Dean of St. Patrick's was united with that of Dean of Christ Church, a situation which lasted in law until 1872. An attempt at major restoration began under the direction of Dean Pakenham, limited by poor economic circumstances. The Lady Chapel was restored, the floor reduced to its original level, and other urgent matters were at least partly addressed. In the mid-19th century, a Celtic cross was found buried near the cathedral. This has been preserved, and it is thought it may have marked the site of the former Holy Well. The major reconstruction, paid for by Benjamin Guinness in 1860–65, and inspired by the fear that the cathedral was in imminent danger of collapse, means that much of the current building and decoration dates from the Victorian era. Medieval chantries were removed among other actions, and few records of the work survive today. Though the rebuilding ensured the survival of the cathedral, the failure to preserve records of the scale of the rebuild means that little is known as to how much of the current building is genuinely medieval, and how much is Victorian pastiche. Sir Benjamin's statue by J. H. Foley is outside the south door. His son Arthur came in for humorous but gentle criticism when he donated a stained glass window of Rebecca at the well. Its motto read, "I was thirsty and ye gave me drink." In 1901, his son Edward created the adjacent St. Patrick's Park from an area of decrepit housing, and donated a new set of bells to the cathedral. The other great change for the cathedral occurred in 1871 when, following disestablishment of the Church of Ireland, the newly independent church at its General Synod finally resolved the two-cathedral issue, making Christ Church the sole and undisputed cathedral of the Dublin diocese and St. Patrick's the national cathedral. Present. The cathedral is the location for a number of public national ceremonies. Ireland's Remembrance Day ceremonies, hosted by the Royal British Legion and attended by the President of Ireland, take place there every November. Its carol service, celebrated twice in December, including every the 24th of December, is a colourful feature of Dublin life. On Saturdays in autumn, the cathedral hosts over 12 ceremonies at which new graduates of Dublin Institute of Technology receive their degrees. The funerals of two Irish presidents, Douglas Hyde and Erskine Hamilton Childers, took place there in 1949 and 1974 respectively. At President Hyde's funeral, the whole of the Irish government and opposition contingent, bar Noel Brown and Childers, stayed in the foyer of the church. This was because, at the time of the funeral, the Holy See forbade Roman Catholics from entering the churches of other Christian traditions. Because President Childers died in office, his state funeral was a major state occasion. The attendants included King Baudouin of the Belgians, the Vice President of the United States, Earl Mountbatten of Burma, British Prime Minister Harold Wilson, and former Prime Minister Edward Heath. In 2006, the cathedral's national prominence was used by a group of 18 Afghan refugees seeking asylum, who occupied it for several days before being persuaded to leave without trouble. Governance. Dean and Chapter. The cathedral is headed by the Dean and governed by the entire chapter, originally 13 in number and having been as many as 30, now numbering up to 28, whose foundation and members' rights derive from the Charter of 1191 as approved by Pope Celestine in 1192. According to the Church Constitution, the dean is the immediate ordinary of the cathedral for the purpose of directing the clergy and official in ordering the services. However, all other matters relating to the cathedral and not otherwise provided for shall be determined in chapter. The members of the chapter, which today represents in part the whole Church of Ireland, hold one of 4 dignities as special officers, or one of 24 prebends. One prebend is reserved for the Archbishop of Dublin, an unusual arrangement which is only actively used for elections of the dean. Of the 13 original prebends, several were later reallocated, new ones created to replace them, and later, yet further prebends were designated. For many years, the chapter comprised the 4 dignities, the archdeacons of Dublin and Glendalough, and 24 prebendaries, but the archdeacons ceased to be members based on those offices in the late 19th century. Cathedral group of parishes. As part of the reorganization of city-based parishes, several were attached to each of the Dublin cathedrals. The St. Patrick's Cathedral group of parishes, which dated as a group from 1970, ceased to exist on the retirement of Dean Robert McCarthy on 25 January 2012. A new parish, called the Parish of St. Catherine and St. James with St. Ordone, was created by and active the General Synod of the Church of Ireland. This new parish is made up of each of the parishes of St. Peter, St. Matthias and St. Ordone, St. Catherine and St. James, and St. Luke and St. Kevin. The rector is the REVD Canon M.D. Gardner, Prebendary of Maynooth. Current officers: Dean. From 1220 to 2007, the Dean held the prebend of Clondalkin, and churches at Kilberry, Clonwanware and Clonard-Macgry, all later in the parish of Kilberry. In 1228, the church of Talla was attached to the deanery. The current dean-elect is the very REVD William Morton, currently Dean of Derry. Precentor. The precentor was given the prebend of a portion of Lusk in 1191, and in 1218 the churches of St Andrew in Dublin and Ard-Eaglais. After several changes, a portion of Lusk was left. The current precentor is the REVD Peter Campion, Chancellor. From 1218 to 2007, the Chancellor held the prebend of Finglas and the churches of St Martin's and Killichurgow, though the latter ceased by 1280. By 1280, St Martin's also no longer provided revenue, but St Werburgh's replaced it. The current Chancellor is the REVD Niall Sloan, Treasurer. This office originally held the Church of Clonkeen and the prebend of St Ordanes, as well as the rectory of St Mary's. Ballymore Eustace later replaced Clonkeen, and part of Lusk, St Ordanes. The current Treasurer is H.E. Finlay, Canon of Windsor, Taney. This prebend, relating to an ancient rural diocese, originated with the 1191 Charter, was given to the Archdeacon of Dublin about 1275 and became independent in 1883 when the office of Archdeacon of Dublin ceased to hold a place in the chapter. The current prebendary of Taney is the Venerable R.W. Carney, Archdeacon of Killaloe and Clonfert, Newcastle, County Dublin. This is a prebend since at least 1227 and was held by the Archdeacon of Glendalough from 1467 to 1872, when that Archdeacon ceased to be a member of the chapter. The current prebendary of Newcastle is the REVD M. Ellis, Rector of Newcastle, Kilmactulway. This was made a prebend circa 1366 and was attached to the office of precentor for a time before becoming independent in 1467. The current prebendary of Kilmactulway is the Venerable G. L. Hastings, Archdeacon of Tuam. Swords has been a prebend since the original charter of 1191. As at September 2011, the Prebendary of Swords is the very Revdgjo Dunstan, Dean of Armagh, Yargard. This has been a prebend since 1191, and was for over 600 years in the patronage of senior Irish aristocrats. The Prebendary of Yargo at September 2011 is the Revdts Forster, Saint Ordone. After over 200 years as an adjunct to the Treasury, this became an independent prebend in 1467. The Prebendary of St. Ordone as at September 2011 is the Revdjp Barry, Rector of Coma, Clonmethan. Clonmethan has been a prebend since the 1191 foundation. At July 2007, the Prebendary of Clonmethan is the Revdp K. Jtdirl, Rector of Ballywullan, Wicklow, attached to the Archdiaconate of Glendalough from the early 14th century to 1467. This has since been independent. Prebendary of Wicklow as at September 2011 is the Revdsc Dugan, incumbent of Ballyholme, Timothan. A manor estate, rather than a church, was attached to the archbishopric until 1247, and has since been independent, though until disestablishment, often vacant. As of September 2014, the Prebendary of Timothan is Canon Paul Willoughby, Rector of the Kilmocomode Union of Parishes, Mulhuddet. Mulhuddet has a history intertwined with the prebend of Castleknock, the two having been designated from at least 1230. The Revdj M. Cathedral Mostrum is Prebendary of Mulhuddet as at September 2011. Castleknock, with a history intertwined with the prebend of Mulhuddet, this has been designated since at least 1230. As at December 2015, the Prebendary of Castleknock is the Revdwp Houston, Rector of Castleknock, Tipper. This has been a prebend since at least 1227. Prebendary of Tipper as at September 2011 is the Revdjdm Clark, Rector of Navan, Tassagard. This has been a prebend since at least 1227. The Prebendary of Tassagard as at September 2011 is the Revdi P. Poulton, Rector of Clonina, Dunlaven. This has been a prebend since no later than 1227. At its September 2011, the Prebendary of Dunlaven as A.H.N. McKinley, Rector of Whitechurch, Maynooth, a prebend since 1248. The right of presentation was long held by a layperson. Prebendary of Maynooth as at September 2011 is the Revdm. D. Gardner, Rector of St. Catherine and St. James with St. Ordone. Howth was one of the founding prebends, and at any early stage, the archbishops removed the prebendal church from Ireland's Eye to Howth village. The Prebendary of Howth as at December 2015 is the very Revdww Morton, Dean of Derry, Rathmickael. This has been a prebend since 1227 at latest. At July 2013, Prebendary of Rathmickael is the Revdcw Mullen, Dean's Vicar, Monmahanic, originally part of the Economy estate, which supported cathedral operations. This became a lay-appointed prebend but was a regular prebend by circa 1227. The Prebendary of Monmahanic is the Revdt. C. Kinnan, Rector of Helens Bay, Tipperkevan. Tipperkevan actually comprised two prebendaries from the early 14th century to circa 1600, lying in the remote parts of County Dublin, later separate from the main county, between Kildare and Wicklow. As at September 2011, the Prebendary of Tipperkevan is the Revd Warren, Rector of Taney Parish, Dunamore. This was a prebend from at least 1267. The Prebendary of Dunamore as at September 2011 is the Revde. R.G. West, Rector of Carntiel, Staganil, named as a prebend in the papal bull of Celestine III. This does not seem to have functioned independently until 1303. The prebendary of Staggenhill as of December 2015 is the REVDP A. Harvey, rector of Abbeyleix, Qualorn. After the impedance of the prebend of Timothan, and following a gap from 1317, this prebend without a church provided a seat for the Archbishop of Dublin at the chapter, used only at the election of a dean. The prebendary of Quailon as of September 2011 is the Archbishop of Dublin, the most REVDMG. St. A. Jackson, Clondalkin, transferred from the Dean in 2007, as one of two newly authorised posts of ecumenical canon. This is now held by the REVD Heather Morris, President of the Methodist Church in Ireland. Finglas, transferred from the Chancellor in 2007, as one of two newly authorised posts of ecumenical canon. This is now held by the REVD Kieran O'Mahony OSA. Ecumenical canons, as noted above, in late June and early July 2007, St. Patrick's appointed two ecumenical canons, one Presbyterian and one Roman Catholic, who can be invited by the dean to say morning or evening prayer in the cathedral, read Holy Scripture and assist at baptisms, marriages, funerals or celebration of Holy Communion, as well as participating in the meetings and decisions of the chapter.